Well, I guess I can just get started with the list. Some of these, everybody on here is gonna know the answers to, but for anybody who watches after,
Courtney will be here in 5, she said. We're here right away.
so the top question I actually get asked is if ducks and geese really do need water deep enough to dunk their heads in. And the answer is yes, for many reasons. They'll blow their nares out into the water to help get any debris out of their nostrils, and it's also really good for their eye health. They need to keep the membranes around their eyes moist. So in dunking their heads, it helps for that eye health, which will help keep like foamy eye and other bacterial or viral eye infections away. So overall, for their respiratory health, it is very important that they have water deep enough to submerge their whole head in, not just the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Do they actually need water with their feed? Again, yes. They wash down their feed with the water. So especially with dry feeds, like if you're not fermenting or making mash with your dry feeds, they're very prone to choking. So they need that water so that they can wash it down. And yes, it does make the waters very dirty, but that's a part of ducks. That's just something you have to deal with, dumping, refilling, all of that. But yes, it is important. Don't give them food if you're not going to give them water at the same time. And then swimming water is the next one that's asked. And this is all over the place. Some people say you can keep ducks without any water, and you can. But their water is very important for the optimal feather quality. So especially in our colder climates, you're going to want to really ensure that their feathers are in the optimal quality leading into winter, so that they don't have wet feather, which is something I'll talk about. That's not only from lack of water, many things can cause that, but so they don't get wet feather, and they need that water so that they'll preen, and while they're preening, they'll release the oils from their oil gland, which is what makes them waterproof. So without access to at least splash on themselves to clean and preen, they can get really dingy feathers that'll start fraying, and then like the feathers should like zip and lock together. And if the top feathers can't zip and lock, then they're actually not very weatherproof. So the wind can get in and ruffle their down. And then when the down gets ruffled by the wind, they lose all these little trapped pockets of air that they hold in the down. And that's how they help to regulate their body temperature, so to keep themselves cool in the summer, but also to keep themselves warmer in the winter. So personally, I think you should at least let them bath at least once a month. Even in the winter, that's what we try to do. If it's above -10 Celsius, we'll give them access to deeper bathing water, just to help ensure they can keep their oil glands active and going. We don't cover our buckets, so they can dunk their heads and splash water onto themselves anytime through the winter. Some breeds will do it even when it's really, really cold, and other breeds won't, but they do have that access if they need it. I guess I talked about winter water. Heidi, do you kind of do the same thing?
Yeah.
Like they have...
Yeah, I'll let mine bath in the winter too. Like if it's warmer than -5, I'll fill up pools or whatever just so that they can get a good cleaning.
Yeah, so when we bath, we try to do it like in the winter on a warmer day, but also where there's not a lot of wind, or set up wind blocks. And then we'll like lay straw out, or we also keep bags of leaves from the fall, so we'll lay leaves out on top of the snow so that when they get out, they're on something dry. just so they're not standing in the snow, or usually it's ice, right? After they've been splashing, it just freezes. And
Yeah.
are ducks noisy?
My
Yes.
duck. You can hear him.
Ducks are noisy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say they're as loud as a goose or a rooster, but the females can be loud. Some breeds are known to be noisier than other breeds, like call ducks. Some, like a Muscovy, which isn't actually a duck, it's kind of its own classification, but gets lumped with ducks. They're not noisy. They only kind of make like a hissy kind of sound. They don't have like an actual duck quack. So you can get quieter, louder birds, but generally most mallard-derived breeds are, the females are loud and they have a really high-pitched tone, so it carries quite a distance. The drakes have a lower tone, so if you're just looking for ducks just for like viewing purposes, ornamental purposes, a drake flock would probably be your best bet if you're in a close subdivision or something like that. How long do ducks live? Ducks can live for 10 to 15 years is what they say is the most common, but there's plenty of people who report their ducks live longer. When I tried looking it up, it said 20 years is kind of the max in captivity. We actually have a Cayuga female that came to us when she was older, and she will be 20 years this spring. She does have some arthritis, but she mainly keeps up to the rest of the flock, and she still lays eggs every now and then, and generally she's just healthy, happy. She's a little slower, has problems with ramps and getting into pools, stuff like that, but they can live for a very long time. And then the same question for geese, and geese can live up to 30 years in captivity. So they are, if you're getting them as pets and not for meat purposes, they are kind of that long haul pet. Are ducks messy? That's a big question.
Hi, Courtney.
Hello.
Hi.
Ducks can be very messy. I find if you have a good setup for your water sources and something around the water so they can't splash it out and then muck up the soil around it, and the more area you can give them, usually the less messy they are. That's what I've found to be true for us. So with like our ponds, we have rocks around the edges so that they can't muck up the edges, but they usually do have a pile of dirt, so they can go and do what they want in their pile of dirt. They can dig for grubs and whatever else, so they're making less of their little drill holes all over our yard. We do use pallets and set our water buckets on top of the pallets so that the water they do splash drains through the pallet, but they can't get in there to muck up where it's going. And then in our our enclosures that are around the coops, I have trenches so that the water drains into the trench and then to the outside, and then it drains down into the ponds. So it's really just that diverting the water. If you can keep the water out of your enclosure or your area that your birds are, it's going to be less muddy. And then also just dealing with their drinking water or their bathing water. I've seen lots of people use sand. But yeah, and also I've used, like, you can get these little electric pumps, and they have a garden hose attachment. So I'll attach the garden hose and I'll pump out my duck water in the spring, and I will water my garden vegetables in the spring with the duck water. So it'll give them a really good nitrogen boost from that duck water. And we have found that it works really, really well for promoting that growth of that plant. So that's kind of a nice way you can use your waste duck water in spring. Male-female ratios and are they actually important is another question we get a lot. And this one's kind of hit or miss. And I personally feel it really depends on the drake's personality and somewhat breed dependent as well. The lighter breeds seem to need more females, but the more space you have, the more you can get away with less females. The heavier breeds is less females. So really based off of just view of overmating, go off that. If they are going after one girl consistently and her neck is bare or getting picked up, she might just be a favorite, or you might need to add in some more females. And just watch for that bullying and the dynamics of how your flock is working together. I've heard of plenty of people who have just couplings, like a drake and a female, so a 1-to-1 ratio in larger flock groups, and it works perfectly fine for them. They say there's no overmating or issues. And then other people, myself included, who have had a 1 drake to 8 females, and he still picked a favorite and targeted her, and so it happens.
Was she white?
Pardon?
Was she white?
No, well, she was a buff, so she's kind of that
My
tan.
lighter colored ducks are the ones that the boys always go for. Like, I actually keep my Pekin girls away from the boys because they're terrible.
That's interesting, because I have seen a lot of people say that Pekins get picked on.
Yeah, I don't let the girls go with the boys anymore.
So anybody else have anything to input about ratios? I know that's not a specific answer I gave, but I honestly don't feel there's a specific answer that you can give.
It is all, it depends on the duck. I don't have a ratio or whatever. Like, I probably have, I don't know, there's probably more boys than girls, but I have some of the boys separated. But in like the big flock, there's not like a special ratio. It's just the boys that are nicer get to go with the girls, and the ones have to get separated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in our breeding groups, I do control it a little more. For our breeding groups, like my heavier breeds will have lower female to male ratio because I need that for the fertility. My lighter breeds will have a higher
Right, yep.
female to male, but just for the general purpose of flocks, yeah, I think you just kind of have to judge off of mainly your drakes. Their own little personality, because they do have them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Another question I get a lot is, can a drake really kill a chicken hen?
Definitely.
The answer is yes. A female chicken is not reproductively set up to withstand a mating from a drake because they have a phallus, whereas a rooster does not. So, yes, it can be very detrimental to chickens. Again, that's going to depend on your drake, I think, because I've seen tons of people who run flocks all together and they don't have problems. And then other people who have said that they had problems right from the get-go. So I think that's another one where you just watch your birds, get to know your birds, and go from there. If you notice your drake's going after hens, well, then you should probably separate them. But I don't have chickens, so this is just off of what I've
have
seen.
them together.
Yeah, and it generally works.
Yeah, like I said, I keep, like, in my big flock are my good boys. So they are the ones that are round chickens, and I have like silky chickens, which are little tiny things, and bantams, and then I have huge chickens, and they're all together and they do great. But they have a huge area. Area matters.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things, even with the duck ratio male to female. The more room they have, the more it seems you can get away
Yeah.
with some things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We get a lot of questions about our pond. Ponds aren't easy to set up for waterfowl. They are quite hard. So the best tips I can give to anybody who wants to set up a pond is have a bog area for plants that your ducks and geese can't get into. And that area should be at least 1/3 of the surface area size compared to your pond. Ours is half the surface area size compared to our pond. So I keep the birds out of there. I have a little fence that they can't get in so they don't destroy those plants. And then we just have a gravity waterfall down. So all of the extra duckweed and hornwort and everything can flow down the waterfall and into the main pond. And then the ducks get that as treats. But if you're going to run a bog, you have to ensure that those plants can get really overgrown because they are what's filtering the water. So you need a gravel base and then your plants, and your plants will filter the water. So pump it through the gravel and then the plants. And you can use pond dyes. They are safe for ducks. You can use pond dyes to help block the sunlight if you have it in an open sun area, which will help inhibit algae blooms. So if there's more specific questions on that, I can try to answer them, but that's generally how I answer that question. Do ducks need heat in the winter? Not really. I mean, our best winter coats are made with down, right? So if they do have that good optimal feather condition, I really feel that they're set up with their countercurrent blood flow in their feet and their down and their outer feathers that are waterproof from their oils and water access and all that we already talked about. They are very hardy little birds. They can look like they're cold because they'll tuck their bill into their wing, but they lose heat off of their bill because there's no feathers there. So it's a way they conserve their heat loss, as well as tucking their feet. Same thing, they'll lose more heat from their legs than their feathered part of their body. So they'll tuck them up to keep them warm. And that shivering that everybody always asks about, that's not actual shivering. All birds, even the little wild birds, they'll fluff up. So they shake their feathers. They can stand their feathers all up, which makes it look like it's shivering. But it's just to trap air pockets in and around in the down layer of their feathers. So then the off heating from their body warms up those air pockets, and then the air pockets help to keep them warm in the winter. I have seen people say that they've had birds freeze outside. I've seen geese that got frozen onto a pond, like frozen right into the pond. So I mean, it can happen, but generally if you're locking your birds up at night, I think you don't need to heat. I have heated before in the past, and it caused more problems for me. My birds weren't as climatized to go out in our cold winters, so once it got past like -25, the birds didn't do good. They weren't eating, they weren't drinking, and I think it was just from that huge change keeping the coop at 0 and then trying to let them go outside at -45 Celsius. That's a huge temperature change and a shock to their system. So I found our birds do much better without heat, just well insulated coops, good ventilation, and a lot of dry bedding that they can nest down into, and that's what I find works the best.
Yeah.
Oh. All right, let's see what the next question I get is. Do ducks fly? Most of the domestic breeds aren't going to fly. There is some geese breeds that can fly, as well as like call ducks and Muscovies. Obviously, they can fly too. But most of your mallard drive breeds, they do what I call gliding. So they can jump about 2 to 3 feet off the ground, and then they can glide for a little bit before they get back to ground level. But it's not true flying. If you have like a 4-foot fence, most of your birds aren't going to be able to get out. So that's not really a huge worry with the mallard drive breeds. Niacin. That's the next. Actually, that's one of the most common ones we get. I never really like to talk about niacin, but the way I see it is if you look at the nutritional requirements that say Metzer Farm has listed out for ducks and geese for their niacin requirements, it's a lot higher per day than what most packaged feeds have. So I can't really speak for American feeds. I've never really looked at them. But for our Canadian feeds, I haven't really found any, unless you're going to bring in Missouri waterfowl feed. Their feed is a high-end feed, and it pretty much meets all of the requirements. But as for any of the other feeds, or if you're mixing your own feed, I do think you should add in niacin. We give niacin to all of our adult birds through the winter. They mainly get their niacin in the wild from bugs. So if there isn't that access for them to forage the niacin naturally, that's my reason for giving it. I do also give it to any of the birds in the brooders. But it's a very much, like I've said many times already, it's your birds, your choice. Just look into it and decide what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So, and geese are even higher for niacin requirements than ducks are. I know most people use brewer's yeast. I use 100% powdered niacin. It's human grade niacin. It's actually for cholesterol health for humans. So I can order it in a 1,000-gram package, which for my amount of birds and the amount of birds that we hatch, that 1,000-gram package will last me an entire year, and it's $56. If you're giving too much niacin to your birds, it is water soluble, so they will flush it. So if they don't need it in their diet, they can flush it out. I just wanted to mention about the powder because I know a lot of people don't give niacin because of the expense of it, but there is cheaper ways that you can do it if that's what's holding you back. You don't want to have to buy brewer's yeast every month or whatever it is, right? I've found that 100% powder works really well. Duck poop in gardens. And I like this topic. Duck poop's not hot like chicken poop. So you can pretty much apply duck poop at any time to your garden or use it in your garden compost. The only forewarning I really give is root vegetables do not like high amounts of nitrogen, which duck poop is high in nitrogen, after they have flowered. So I wouldn't be watering with duck poop or adding in a compost that's just duck poop after that flowering stage. But for the first beginning of spring, I find it actually helps our plants grow a lot better. And I have done tests where these ones got it and these ones didn't. And for that greening stage and that growth stage, I find it works really well. Just not for root veggies after they've flowered, because they'll keep growing that greens because that's what nitrogen's for. And the root vegetables can be suppressed in their growth. They need more phosphorus and different things after that flowering stage for that root growth. Bumblefoot. So I was actually talking with Heidi about this one earlier. I feel a lot of people ask how do I fix bumblefoot? And more people should ask, why do I get bumblefoot? So the how and the why together are great. And I do not mind helping people. If you message the farm page and ask me how to do something, I will tell you as much as I know, or what I would do. But bumblefoot is a staph infection. So just like humans, birds have immune systems too. I guess I should give a forewarning here. I've never had a case of bumblefoot. So this is what I would do if I had a case of bumblefoot, but I've never had one, so this is an actual experience. But I feel if you are maintaining your bird's immune systems, they're going to be less likely to get an infection, just like a human. If we have strong, robust immune systems, we are less likely to get viral or bacterial infections, and I feel that goes the same for other animals. Bumblefoot can happen from any kind of injury. Anything that pierces the skin can lead to bumblefoot. So it can be from straw, it can be from birds getting into it with each other, fences, anything, sticks, anything that can cause an injury. So a lot of when you look up online, it says unsanitary conditions is the reasoning for bumblefoot. I just personally don't feel that that's always true, so I just wanted to point that out and say that. For us, personally, we would probably treat it with essential oils and herbs. You can make like a poultice that will help draw out the infection to the surface, so then you can just remove the scab, which would open the wound, and it should seep. So those types of essential oils that I would use, I have used these oils with my birds before, just not for bumblefoot, would be tea tree oil, oregano, and lavender. So I've used similar to this on other wounds, and I've done 1 drop of each essential oil with 6 drops of coconut oil. And then just mix it up, and then you can apply it. So these are like powerful antibacterial, antiviral essential oils. You do not want to go overboard with essential oils. So you'll only want to do this once or twice a day max. Too much of anything is never good, right? So, and then you just kind of rub it into the wound, and then you can wrap the wound so that the oil is staying in there, and so you're also keeping out poop, basically. So you're keeping poop off of the wounds.
Do you know anybody who keeps bees?
We have some local bee farmers by us. We use a lot of raw honey.
Raw honey will help draw the infection out. That's what I use when we have bumblefoot.
Okay, perfect. I didn't know. We use honey to help heal on a lot.
I don't know what's in raw honey, but it's good.
Oh yeah.
Great. Yeah, I guess it's also very antibacterial and everything, right? So why wouldn't it? For sure. There's also a garlic tincture that you can make. This is actually from Jeff Mattox. He's a Fertrell food dealer in the States, is where I've seen him from. But he has a garlic tincture, and if anybody's interested in that, I could send you the recipe and the how to do it all and whatever. But he says you can replace an antibiotic with this garlic tincture if it's made the proper way. It's just as potent as an antibiotic. So for us, since we never go to antibiotics as our first line, that's something I have marked down, that I would try that with bumblefoot before going to an antibiotic. And then I just have herbs that are known to be good to boost the immune system. So thyme, oregano, and I actually don't know how to say this one properly. Astragalus. It's Astragalus. So a lot of people who do herbs with their poultry swear by those herbs, and they'll just help to boost that bird's immune system, which then the immune system should help fight the infection, right? So that's just kind of the key behind it. Other things would be you can lance it, push out the infection. I wouldn't recommend that. I think if you're going to go the lancet route, you should just go to a vet. That's my opinion on that. Now, if the scab's there and it's really bubbled up and you can soak it and just peel the scab off and allow the infection out that way, that's different. But if you're actually going to lance it and cut it, then I think you should just take the bird to a vet. And that's, yeah. So while we're herbal people, I'm not against vets. I just don't think they should be your first line of defense. That's all. And colloidal silver. So that's another one people use a lot with good results. And then wet feather. So wet feather can come from many things. If you look it up online, it's going to say unsanitary conditions, same as bumblefoot. But I've seen firsthand how mud can cause wet feather. So we had never had a case on our own property of wet feather. We had brought in birds that had wet feather. Last fall, it got really muddy, and I started getting wet feather in the fall. The only thing that was different with the birds, they had swimming water, everything, was they would go and get in that mud, and then they would get locked up for the night, and that mud would dry onto their feathers, and it would remove the oil from the feathers. So I do not think it is just unsanitary conditions that can cause wet feather. So people who have questions about wet feather, do not feel embarrassed to ask about wet feather and what you can do to resolve that issue. For what we have had, and we did have one guy come to us, he was pretty severe. I've checked the oil gland to make sure the oil gland's not clogged, is always the first thing. If it is clogged, then you'll probably need to do the Dawn dish soap bath, which is not a lot of Dawn dish soap, just a little bit. And you're actually using it to strip everything off their feathers, so all of their good oil and anything else that's on that bird. And that should help. You can do compression on the oil glands, like warm compression, to help get it unclogged and flowing again. But for most cases, I found that just getting them out of the mud and giving them access to clean bathing water, will resolve on its own in most cases. So the biggest thing I find is just trying to keep that mud away. I know with the Dawn dish soap bath, you're supposed to keep them out of water for three or 4 days after doing it. And then you would allow them access to the water again so that they can preen and start spreading that oil and everything again. But yeah, if it's not a severe case, I think, I don't know, do you guys have anything to add to that, or tell me I'm out to lunch or anything?
No, I think that you got it.
So it's what's worked for us, is just give them that more access to that water. Try to keep them out of the mud and allow them to just recoat their feathers. If their feathers are severely bad, you have to remember they're not going to grow in new feathers till they molt. So, of course, you're going to want to try to catch it as soon as you can. And if it only seems to be getting worse and not better, then I would go to the Dawn bath. what I would do.
Yeah, we don't get rain here or anything, so we don't get mud to have to deal with that.
Yeah, and
My place is just covered in mud right now. There's mud everywhere.
Oh,
But it's so much better than ice. I've never been so happy to see mud.
I bet. I've seen some of your skating rinks out there.
They overnight, like it poured last night. It was
Oh.
50 degrees today and like everything melted and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm not going to fall on my ass today."
Yay!
the ice is
That's
definitely the
funny.
worst to deal with in the winter.
Me and the ice are not friends, but I haven't broken any bones falling on it yet.
Well,
Yeah.
that's definitely
Yet.
a plus. Knock on wood.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, deep litter. So, there is kind of a science behind deep litter. You can do trial and error to see what works best for you. I do think your moisture is going to play into it somewhat as well. So, what we do might not work perfectly for somebody else. But you need to get the right carbon to nitrogen ratio. And so if you have too much carbon in your deep litter, or just compost, period, you can end up getting like it's a white mold, and it's from that excessive heat because carbon gets a lot hotter. And that white mold is actually very bad for people and animals to breathe in. So while you're stirring it, or if your animals are turning it, like if you have chickens or even our ducks, they'll like dig their bills into the bedding and they'll kind of root through. That can cause you respiratory problems for people as well. So you do kind of have to get that right balance with your carbon and nitrogen. If you have too much nitrogen and not enough carbon, you're going to get smell. So if your compost is smelly or your deep bedding is smelly, it can be a few reasons. Too much moisture, not enough moisture, or an improper carbon nitrogen ratio. So what I find works best for us is shavings as a base, and we start like 6-ish inches. Some people say start 8 inches. And then, so that's my base because it doesn't compact a lot. So you need that layer for the good bacteria to live in. So if you start too small, the good bacteria don't have enough room. They're not going to want to live there. So good base, that's the main thing. And then every 4th time we add onto the deep bedding, we use something that's lower in carbon. So for us, that's like grass clippings we've kept from the summer, leaves we've collected from the fall, or spent hay works really well too. So people who have larger livestock, your spent hay can be for your deep bedding. And then the other layers are usually a mixture between straw and wood shavings. The colder it is, the more I use straw in the deep bedding because my birds are out there on that all day. They do have access to go back to their coop, but I find they prefer to be on the straw over the wood shavings if it's really cold outside. So that's kind of a mix for us, is wood shavings and straw for 3 applications, and then the higher or lower carbon, for the 4th. And then if you don't have chickens who will scratch it, they'll mainly do a lot of the work for you apparently. But for us with the ducks, we try to turn, like rake it over every 1 to 2 weeks. So and if it's frozen, I'll at least take a pitchfork and I'll like aerate. I'll poke a bunch of holes into it so that the air can get down in there, because if it gets anaerobic, those good bacteria are going to die, and then they're not They're not making your pen any more hygienic. You need those good bacteria in order for the deep litter method to work on the hygiene aspect of it. As they're working, they're breaking down and they're killing the bad bacteria, right? So, and then with the heat, also helps with that. So it is a little trial and error, but just deep layer of carbon to start, and then 2 more applications of carbon material, which you'll depends on the amount of animals you have in there and this area. If you have a larger area and less birds, you're not going to have to apply every day. If you have a small area with a lot of birds, you're going to have to apply every day. So you just kind of have to judge. If it looks poopy, just throw out some straw or shavings and just cover it up. And then, so it could be every 1 to 3 days. 1 to 3 days is generally where we sit at for adding onto the deep bedding. So it's about every 3rd week that I add in a lower nitrogen, or a higher nitrogen, lower carbon material. And I have fermenting feed on here. So, sorry, I'm just gonna have a drink quick. So for fermenting feed, it'll increase the bioavailability of the nutrients. And in the process of fermenting grains, it's actually called lactofermentation, it creates probiotics. So then your birds are consuming those probiotics, which of course helps with their gut, which in turn helps with their immune system. So with the fermenting feed, it also increases the amount of moisture they're intaking. So I find our ducks are drinking less water when we ferment their feed than if they're having dry feed. Obviously that water access is still very important, but it helps increase the amount of moisture your birds are getting in, which will help you with dehydration issues, which I've made posts about that. You have to worry about dehydration in the winter just as much as in the summer months. You end up feeding less if you're fermenting. So the claims on the internet is that it's about 40% less that you feed if you're fermenting. I found for the ducks and geese, it's about 25 to 30% less. So it is less, but it's not going to cut your feed bill in half and all of those things you see on the internet. Pair it with sprouting or growing fodder, you could probably cut your feed bill in half. But I think generally overall fermenting is good to do. Same for humans. Fermented feed are amazing for us. Fermented foods are amazing for us to eat, just like the feed is for the animals. It's quite simple. You can take like a 5-gallon food grade bucket. You want to make sure it's food grade or stainless steel, something like that, so nothing can leach out into the grains that you would then give to your animals. So you can just do it in one bucket, or you can take a second 5-gallon bucket and drill a bunch of holes into the bottom of it and stack them together. Put your grains into the top bucket, fill it up with water. You got to stir it daily and let it sit for 2 to 3 days. The warmer the conditions are that you're doing it in, the less time it takes to actually ferment. And then if you did the stack bucket way, you would just pull your top bucket up and the water would drain out. So they claim that the impurities of the grain goes into that water. So they say you shouldn't really be feeding the water to the animals. We have just dumped it out onto the grass and let them pick through and get the grains, because the ground's going to siphon that water, right? I don't feel like they're going to get a lot of it. But the double stacked buckets make it quite easy. You can just pull out the top one, the water will drain out, and you're just left with your fermented grains, and then you can go out and feed or whatever. If it gets smelly, it's not good. So it does have a little bit of a smell to it, but it shouldn't smell moldy. If you've ever made, like, I don't know, if you've made like sauerkraut, fermentation has a smell, but it's not necessarily a bad smell. If it smells like musty, moldy, then it's probably not good. And if it has mold growing on it, then obviously it's not good. Don't feed that to your animals. You'd want to scrap it and restart over. Lots of people keep their water. They'll get their grains out and keep that water to start the next batch. And if you do that, it will speed up the process, like the fermentation process. But again, you gotta, at some point that liquid is gonna go bad. It's gonna go rancid. So I have done it for like 2 or 3 times and then started with fresh water. So just keep that into account. If that's what you're gonna do, your fermentation is gonna be a lot faster. So while you're reusing that water, you might only be fermenting for 1 to 2 days. And then when you restart a batch, it's not going to be ready for 3 days. So you have enough to kind of get through. And the getting through is just to not stress the birds. If you switch up a huge part of their diet, they're not always the happiest with you. And they'll let it be known. It's the same with treats. If you come with treats too late, or God forbid you miss it by an hour, they're letting you know.
You're in trouble.
So I just always generally try to make sure we have enough going so that I'm not messing with their diet too much.
I ran out of peas the other day.
Oh no. That is a sin.
Oh, it is. I'm sure I'm still in trouble with them.
So that's basically what I have. Heidi, you got anything to add, or Courtney?
Well, I think you covered it pretty good. What other ones have I had? Water. Just mostly been water and hatching. And what other ones have I had? Breeds of ducks going with each other. Different breeds of ducks. That was another one that came up. About putting breeds of ducks together. Well, they can all go together.
I have all kinds of breeds together.
Yeah. Well, like I've had one person, they messaged me and they said, well, is it okay if they put their silver apple yards in with like a blue Swedish? And it's like, well, yeah, it's whatever you've got room for, right?
I wouldn't put a call in with a pecan.
No.
Oh, wow.
No. And call ducks do fly.
They do.
Those are
but if they like you, they don't fly anywhere. I have call ducks and Muscovies, and I do not clip wings because of predators, and they don't go anywhere. They're here. They're like, that's the food lady, I'm going to get her.
But I've seen people have calls in with bigger ducks. Like would the call just fly away?
It depends on the duck.
Yeah.
Really.
So yeah, kind of.
I don't have male pecans with them, but there is some female, like my female pecans, like I said, I keep separated. They live with the calls and they're cool. It's just like I wouldn't want a male pecan to try and breed with a female call
to get a hold of.
They're like, the calls are tiny compared to everybody.
Yeah, they are tiny. They're what is it? The males will weigh just over 1.75 pounds, and the females are about 1 pound.
Yeah, no, they're little.
Yeah. I've got 8 of them. They are tiny.
I have 15 of them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, but you got like tons of them.
I do. I have a lot of property, and when we moved here, people were like, "Oh, Courtney likes ducks and chickens," and they kept like telling me about all these people that would get them for Easter and
Oh,
not want them anymore. So a lot of the ducks here are rescues, and some of them were like people dumped them on frozen ponds, and I was like, "Yeah, they're not staying there. I'm going to get them."
that's
So
awesome.
keeps me occupied, I suppose.
But they have so much fun.
No, it's cool. Because we have a lot of fruit trees.
Mhm.
So if you let them free range under your fruit trees, it keeps like the bug and worm population down on the fruit.
Mhm.
So they free range under all our fruit. We use all their fertilizer to grow all our food. And I don't know, the chickens are more of like the tick patrol, and then have guineas that do tick patrol.
Mhm.
But it's kind of like part of the all natural thing, but I don't think that I could ever eat a duck. I don't do meat at all.
Yeah.
I think the ducks and the geese work good with permaculture.
They absolutely do. Sure.
Yeah, they have so many good qualities besides just meat or eggs that can be used within a
Right.
system to kind of everything helping each other out, right?
Yeah.
The eggs we do sell, but like I have a lot of people be like, "How can you have this many animals and not use them for meat at all?" And I'm like, there's other uses other than just meat for animals, and I could never do that for my friends.
I don't know. I haven't got to that point yet.
We have
Oh.
our pet group, then we have our breeding groups, and we also have our butchering
Yeah.
groups. So we're kind of
No.
in all the areas of it. Um, it is hard. I mean, if you're gonna raise a group of them for butchering, go in it with that mindset. Is don't treat them like you treat your pet group.
Makes it
Yeah,
easier.
yeah. It's. I mean, everybody to their own. That's.
Mhm.
Well, like I grew up on a meat farm. We had like turkeys and chickens and pigs and cows, and it was like the cool cow would be like the first one to go to slaughter. And now I'm like, okay, I'm older. Like, I love farming, it's my favorite thing, but I just don't have the heart to raise them for myself. Like, if you were to raise a cow for me, I would totally eat it all day long, but I can't do it myself.
Well, and I think that's one of the biggest things with farming or homesteading or farmsteading, whatever you want to call it. You got to do what you like to do and what you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable
Yeah.
with it, you're not 100% going to be in it, and you're not going to, you won't get the outcome that you want. So,
True story.
yeah, and it's like, I don't know. I can make herbal teas, but I don't like to, so I'm just going to buy that. Right? Why do I have to do absolutely everything? Is kind of the thing, right? Source out
Right.
what you're not comfortable doing and do the things that you love to do, and then you'll have that
Yeah.
that joyous life, right?
Mhm.
Whatever works.
Yeah, each to their own.
That's right.
Sienna, did you have any questions or?
I guess a bit more about the nutrition, maybe, and if you have like what feeds you have found that are good in like here in Alberta. I've been kind of trying a few different brands, and I can only mainly find pelleted feed. But is there any textured feeds you can find around that are good for fermenting?
Um, Well, you can make kind of like a mash with the pelleted feed. So it does semi-ferment it. And we do that. Feed and nutrition is, I still haven't 100% figured it out. Now, I'm not going to say that they can't do well on the store-bought feeds, because honestly, mine have in the last 10 years. We've always fed Country Junction Duck and Goose Grower. So, and then we also do just grains on the side. So we use high pro grains. They're actually they're mainly sold for cattle, right? But they're just whole grains or steam rolled barley, or you can get like whole oats. So we'll just buy the different bags of the high pro grains. I get mine at PV Mart, if that's helpful. And then I'll mix them and I'll use them for the fermenting of the grains. There is a few feed companies that I can recommend, like if you're aiming for organic or you're okay with...
Yeah, no, or not necessarily organic, no.
Okay. So Gascon, Gascon, Custom Milling, they will formulate whatever feed you want. If you want to make your own feeds. And they use the Fertrell premixed vitamins to make it a complete feed. And then there's also Taiga Acres, Tiga Acres. They also use the Fertrell premix vitamins. So I spoke to Jeff, and he said for ducks he would recommend the Poultry Nutra, hang on, just so I say this right, Poultry Nutri Balancer. So that would be through Taiga Acres, you could get that. But what I use is, like I said, I do those whole grains or steam rolled grains, and I mix them like a 1-to-1-to-1. So barley, oats, and wheat. And then you can use chicken scratch to ferment if you wanted. I've done that as well. And then I use that for about 50% of their diet is grains, anything growing, so like the microgreens, the fodders, any of the green stuff. We also do get some stuff from Loop, so that's counted in the 50%. And the other 50% is the Duck and Goose Grower from Co-op, Country Junction. And in that grower, since I'm taking a complete diet, so they say, the grower, I have nothing bad against Country Junction, but they are not a complete diet. But most of the feeds aren't. If you look at the nutrient requirements, they're not. They're just what's available to us. But I'm taking that complete feed and I'm cutting it by 50, right? So technically the vitamins and the minerals are cut by 50 as well. So we use Poultry Macro Premix, OIS, that is also from Co-op, Country Junction. It is listed under their organic feeds, but it's about $56 for a 50-pound bag that would be mixed with 1,000 pounds of feed. So since I'm only using it for half the amount, I'm only adding half of the required amount, because you don't want to go over on the vitamins and minerals either. So for their 1,000 pounds of feed, I'm actually using it for 2,000 pounds, because I'm not using it for the grains. I'm only adding it into the grower. So it lasts me longer, right? And when I was talking to Jeff about his, the NutriBalancer through the Fertrell company, He said if you're going to use it with a prepackaged feed, because the prepackaged feed isn't up to par, do it at half the recommended amount. If you're mixing your own feed completely, then use it at the full 3%. So that's basically what I do too. I just haven't switched over to their brand yet. I'm still using that Co-op brand. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
I guess I'll sorry. I also add that niacin through the winter, that powdered niacin. And then I also vitamin E. We've been doing, because vitamin E works with selenium. They need to work together or they don't work, basically. Our feeds here in Canada have adequate amount of selenium, but they're low in vitamin E. So I add vitamin E, like human grade gel capsules, into their water in the mornings.
And do you only ferment the grains or the packaged feed as well?
When it's warm, I was doing their feed as well, but I was just doing it overnight. So I'd do their feed with water overnight, and then in the morning I would mix my fermented grains in, and then I would take it out to them. If you're not really looking to increase their water intake, if you're going to do fermented grains as well, I don't see a huge benefit to fermenting the packaged feeds. But if you're noticing they're not really eating the pellets, then I would consider wetting it down a little bit.
I have some more research to do then.
I do find that the country...
And then you probably provide oyster shell or something too then, free choice?
Yeah.
If you're just using a grower, yeah.
Yeah, some kind of a calcium on the side. Lots of people mix it right into their feeds. We've never had a problem with soft eggs or anything like that. We've had the odd new laying female, like just start laying, who's had soft eggs, but in the last decade I've never had like a consistent problem with soft shells or any indication that they are low on calcium. So I just leave it as free choice for them. I don't add any into the actual feed bucket.
Yeah. I find if I leave it free choice, they eat a ton of it, and then their eggs, like, I don't know, they're just extra smelly.
Do you have some other form of grit out for them?
I guess that was in the summer. I didn't have it out because they were free ranging.
Yeah. So if you put out like a silica grit, then you might find that they stop eating so much of the oyster shells. Because they might just be going after the shells for that grit component of it to help break up their food. So if you have a silica grit out and it's the grit that they need, they'll eat the silica instead of the oyster shells.
Okay.
But yeah, generally when like we used to free range too, before I started breeding more, we didn't have grit out for them. They always found what they needed. But now that they're penned, I have my feed, my silica, and the calcium. They're all kind of right by each other, so they can just pick what they need.
It's like a buffet.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I want to get some kelp. So then I'll have kelp out too. I'll just be that crazy person who has the whole selection.
have lots going on.
But I do find when they're not really laying, they'll eat way more silica through the winter than they'll eat the calcium. So that could be the what's going on, is they're just using it as a form of grit to help break up that food. They're not really needing that much calcium, so. And I don't know. I use grade 2, I think. It's the medium grade at Co-op again. Right now all my feed comes from local farmers, Co-op, or PB Mart.
Yeah, I got mine from UFA. Some of mine I get from the pet store because it's the only place I can buy food. Like, that's the only place I can get my Country Junction is at the pet store. But
Yeah, because you're way
You
out
guys don't have like grain stores there that sell feed?
I do. Like, the Co-op local to me is an actual feed mill.
Yeah.
So they have a storefront, but they're a feed mill. So I can buy bulk right from them if I want to. But there's not that many feed mills around. Most everything is prepackaged food. So then you're always kind of juggling with the nutrients. And I think Country Junction is the only brand that makes a duck food.
yeah, duck and goose starter grower. Yeah.
We can order in Missouri waterfowl feed, but it costs you an arm and a leg in shipping.
Yeah.
So
Missouri would come from the U.S., right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you pay like an extra fee to have it brought into your country?
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. I just learned that the other day from a guy in Portugal, and I was like, what? You have to pay extra to have stuff brought into countries?
It's a duty charge that we have to pay to have them bring it in.
Yeah, it's the same as like
That's what he said too.
Vitamins and minerals, like certain health food products. If you're trying to bring them across the border, they'll stick you with a duty fee.
Yep. Essential oils, some of them too.
Yeah, Canada has weird regulations with our shipping. Makes it a little bit harder.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And the Country Junction, it doesn't have a layer ration?
They have a layer ration for chickens, but not for ducks and geese.
Yeah, for the ducks and geese, it's just starter and then the grower. That's all they have for the ducks and the geese.
Yeah, I fed those when they were little, but I remember the grower saying on the bag it said don't feed it past a certain age.
Yeah. It
didn't say why, but
it's like the chicken feed that's the grower finisher, like you're getting them ready for butcher.
Yeah.
So it can make them fat, but that's one of the reasons, like, it's not a very good maintenance or breeder ration. But like I said, we don't have a lot of options unless we're going to start piecing things together. We don't have a lot of options here for a good feed that's actually formulated for ducks or for geese, because even between the two of them, they have different nutritional needs too, right? So that's part of the reason why I use the grains and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I'm just trying to decide what to do. I have chickens too, so I was like, I don't know if I go to a layer ration and try to supplement or what.
You can feed a layer ration, like to your ducks, like a chicken layer ration. Lots of people do it. I would suggest that you do niacin and vitamin E, and or get some kind of a poultry NutriBalancer to add into it. It would be great for your chickens too. If once you start
Yeah,
diving,
I think that's the road I could go.
yeah, that's honestly the best way. Then I think the NutriBalancer doesn't cover, like the one I'm getting right now doesn't cover vitamin E, but I'm pretty sure the Fertrell one does cover vitamin E, but it still wouldn't cover the niacin. So,
Okay.
and I'm not saying niacin is the most important vitamin, just most of our feeds are high enough in the other B vitamins. They're usually just lacking in that niacin, vitamin E, and methanol, usually. So if you're adding in like a NutriBalancer or the Country Junction premix, which is minerals and vitamins, kind of the same idea, just different company, they're going to bring all of those extra things back up. And yeah, it is. It's a 50-pound bag that's good for 1,000 pounds of feed. So the Country Junction one is $56. And it will last me like 2 months, maybe 3 months. I would have to do the math again. So I mean,
And that was a different brand of NutriBalancer.
hang on, I'll put the Country Junction one.
Yeah.
I'll put it in
That
the chat. Yeah, it's actually formulated for people who are pre-mixing all of their own feeds, like sourcing their own grains and everything to do a whole pre-mix. So this would be all of the extra vitamins and minerals that they say aren't in those grains, or the protein that you're sourcing or whatever. So that one, if you're doing a packaged feed, do it at half the amount that it says to do it at, because your feed does have some of those vitamins and minerals already in it. That makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, well, I can put these other links in there too. So this is the Fertrell one. Well, and that's the Taiga Acres. That's the actual one, but Taiga Acres has other feeds too. They don't have duck and goose feeds, just other animals. And then Gascon is a custom milling company. So they would help you formulate your own feed if that's the route you would want to go. They are an organic company though. So I do believe like Master Feeds also will help you formulate your own feed. Heidi, do you?
I don't think they will help you formulate like Master Feeds, from what I understand, from what I've read or understood, was they will help make one, but I'm not sure if they have a nutritionalist on site to help with that. Whether it be for specifically for ducks or if it would be like an all flock.
Yeah. Yeah. So that Gascon is going to be more expensive. So if you're looking to get into organic, I would suggest it. That's kind of the route we're going to be going here this year. I just haven't done it yet. But other than that, for you specifically, I would say probably go to the chicken layer ration, add in the niacin, and add in either the Fertrell Poultry NutriBalancer or get the Country Junction Poultry Macro Premix, theirs is called, and add that in at half of what is recommended on that package. And both of those are formulated for chickens, so they are not going to hurt your chickens, but they will help bring up that balance I don't want to talk bad about feed companies, but the chicken feed isn't even good feed. It's not what they need. So, especially if
Oh,
you're
we've learned
breeding.
it in cattle as well. The pelleted feed, yeah.
Yeah.
It may say they have the particular nutrients, but how did they get there?
Yeah.
What did they use to get those nutrients? I don't know.
Exactly. That's like the selenium added into the duck feed. Yeah, it's the perfect amount. But the vitamin E is not, so they're only absorbing a small
Can't
fraction
use
of the
it.
selenium, right? So I'm not trying to
Yeah.
talk bad about feed companies. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
as a general rule of thumb, for breeding or long-term maintenance of your birds, we don't have a lot of good feed options.
Yeah, like so. I mean, like with me, I feed the country junction feed, and then I mix it with like hen scratch and oats and stuff. It's probably about, and then I put the niacin in as well, right? But it's probably the closest that you can find. I find for them anyway, especially being out here,
Yeah. Yeah, you're way out in
boondocks.
nowhere land.
Come
But
on,
I
I'm
guess
only 45 minutes to the nearest store.
I guess I should know
Yeah, we're in nowhere land as well.
with that fermented feed, you should do less oats in the
Yeah.
summer months. So most people do
Okay.
like a wheat oat mix in the winter and a barley wheat in the summer. Just because the oats are really high in fats and they're a little harder for the birds to break down, so they really heat up their systems. So they say then you have to worry about dehydration issues and stuff like that if you're feeding a lot of oats in the warm months. So barley, wheat in the warm months is good, and oats, wheat, barley, whatever you want to do, but your oats could be for the colder months. You can still have some oats, don't get me wrong, but it should be a lower amount in the summer months.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm sorry I can't directly answer your question, but that's, I think, would be your best.
No, I'm off to a better start now.
Well, it's so hard. Like, I mean, like Cassandra said, like, we just aren't set up here in Canada like they are down in the States for duck and goose food. And, like, we don't have that option. So it's just a matter of trial and error and trying to figure out what works best, right?
Yeah.